There are times when people take you off guard. There were 5 young men who kept disturbing an elderly veteran's meal. Eventually, they even made him cry. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. They were watching the elderly couple with 5 young men in front of them. No one could believe what was happening right in front of them. The older man and his wife both had tears in their eyes. It shocked everyone around them. The elderly man seemed proud, but after the men had gone up to him multiple times, they now left him in tears. Lou Zezoff, who is 74, loves going out to eat with his wife Annette. But when they headed out to a Cracker Barrel near their home in Granite City, Illinois, they never would have expected the turn their day would take. Lou was a proud veteran, and he always wore his U.S. Navy Vietnam veteran cap that identified him as a Navy vet who fought in Vietnam. The couple often went to eat at the restaurant, and they had never experienced anything like the events that would take place that day. Lou had earned his right to wear that cap through years of service and hard work. He was in the Navy from 1959 to 1963, and he served in different ways during his time there. He served in the Vietnam War on the aircraft carrier the USS Coral Sea as Petty Officer Second Class. He worked as a plane captain on the carrier, even though he was designated a parachute rigger. That meant he was responsible for the plane from the moment that they did the pre-flight checkups until the moment that the plane got back to the ship. It was a lot of responsibility, but a challenge that Lou thrived on. Finally, he finished his deployment and he could return home to his wife and their family. It was a moment that many of them had been waiting for years. Getting Lou back into their life permanently was a massive blessing. There were many times they worried that he wouldn't return. Now, he was back, and they could live their life again. It wasn't easy to adjust at home. He felt like he didn't have the purpose that was such a big part of his life for such a long time. He knew he had to give his life purpose again. When he left the service, Lou knew that he still wanted to spend his life helping others. He wasn't in the service anymore, but just because he was a civilian didn't mean he couldn't be of service to people. He had skills that he could use, and he was used to a high-pressure job. There was one job that could fit. He decided to become a police officer. For the rest of his working life, he continued to use the skills he got in the Navy to solve crimes. He later became a detective, and then, in his last few years on the force, he worked court security with the U.S. Marshal Service. Lou retired in 1996. He could finally spend more time with his own family and be less focused on other people. This is a man who gave most of his life helping other people. Yet, he never understood when people admired him for the life he lived. It was just what he needed to do. It was wonderful to spend time with his wife, doing things like going to dinner without being called out for a crime. But this dinner would be more memorable than any they had ever had. They went into the restaurant and were seated. As someone who made a life observing people in his surroundings, Lou quickly noticed 5 guys who sat not far from them. They were young guys, and at most, the couple could hope they wouldn't be too rowdy. But somehow, Lou didn't think so. He noticed their high and tight haircuts, and he would never have thought that they would make any sort of scene. He was wrong. It wouldn't be long before the young men had everyone looking at them and at Lou. Lou was always alert when going out. If he could be identified as a vet or as a former cop, then he had to be careful. There are a lot of people these days who have a negative feeling about those careers. He was proud of his work, but he would never want to put his wife in a situation that could go badly. There was a time he could protect her in just about any situation they could face, but he was older now. He was still fit and energetic, but he wasn't as strong as he used to be. If he had to face more than one perpetrator, he would not be able to have a choice. As the older man glanced over to them, the young men were observing the couple too. They were especially interested in the hat that Lou was wearing. They started talking amongst themselves. Lou and Annette ordered and had their drinks in front of them, and that was when the mood of the night changed completely. It would be the first time when one of the young men would disturb the couple. The 5 young men kept disturbing the elderly veteran's meal, and in the end, they would end up making Lou cry. Lou and his wife were quietly talking when they saw that one of the young guys had stood up from his table and come over to them. Lou knew from the moment he saw them that they were military, but he never expected them to come to him. The younger generation might not even feel a connection with an older service member. As soon as the young guy stood next to him, Lou, as the gentleman he was, stood up too. Uncertain about what to expect from the youngster, what he experienced completely took him by surprise. The young man explained he just wanted to shake his hand, to thank him for the sacrifice that Lou had made during the Vietnam War. The young men were all Marines, and they had a lot of respect for those that came before them. These older men not only fought for their country, but also changed the service in many ways for younger service members in later years. The young man wanted to express his thanks for all of those things. It was a sweet moment that left Lou smiling, but it was not going to end there. That young man returned to the table, but Lou and Annette had ordered their meal when another young man approached them. Again, Lou stood up, interrupting their night. The rest of the guys stood up while their friend came over. Once again, Lou wasn't sure what more to expect. The second young man just wanted to thank Lou too. Not only that, but this young man was sent by the rest of the group to express all of their gratitude. Again, Lou shook hands with the young guy, and this time they took a while to chat a bit about their experiences. Annette knew how much these types of experiences meant to her husband. The bond he still felt with other service members was immense. But at his age, he didn't get as many opportunities to share moments with other service members. For young men to come up to him and show their appreciation was just incredibly special. It was not how they expected their meal to go, but it was even better than they thought it would be, and it was going to get even better. Lou spent some time chatting with the young men, offering words of encouragement for their future and expressing well wishes for their careers as Marines. Upon the arrival of his meal, he returned to it, savoring warm and fuzzy feelings as his heart swelled with warmth. Those young Marines already made Lou's night. It was always special when someone thanked him for his service, but when it was young service members, it was even more special. His wife loved seeing how happy this simple gesture and the conversation made her husband. They could have their dinner, and it was delicious as always. It was time to get their bill and head home, but they didn't know that the evening was far from over. The waiter came with their bill, and when he placed the check down, he smiled and said that it was the couple's lucky day. The bill had already been paid. He brought them the receipt, not to pay for it, but because a message was written across it. At the top of the receipt, it said Semper Fi, and at the bottom, it said Hoorah! It was his fellow service members who had paid their check. It was an amazing gesture from the young Marines, especially since they probably couldn't really afford it. Lou went over to the group and placed his arms around one of them. He tried talking them out of paying for everything. Showing their appreciation was already plenty to make his night special. He explained that he knew they didn't make a lot of money as part of the military. Buying a whole extra meal for a couple was not a small thing, but the Marines refused his offer to pay them back. They wanted to show their respect in a tangible way. They wanted to show their appreciation, and this was the only way they could do it at that moment. The only thing left to do was accept the meal with grace. Lou thanked them, and he went back to Annette. He was in awe of how incredible these young men were. It was already one of the most special nights that Annette and Lou could remember, but it was still far from over. No one was going to believe what happened next. Lou and the young men had been back and forth for a while, and the rest of the restaurant had started to take notice. And what the young guys would do next would have everyone staring. The noisy restaurant would instantly go quiet. Annette got her bag, and Lou grabbed his jacket. They started getting ready to leave, but the Marines didn't want the vet to leave without another show of respect. One of the guys went to pay the bill, and he would fall in line as soon as he was done. But to stop them from leaving, the young men started to act. Approaching Lou's table, they extended their hands, forming a line in front of him. Each one would then shake his hand and offer a hug. When they finished their turn, they would walk to his right. It was at this stage that the proud Marine started to tear up. This show of respect just got to him, and he wasn't the only one. His wife was openly crying across the table, and it touched many other people across the restaurant too. Everything was quiet and respectful. They all felt how special this moment was too. When all of them were done shaking his hand, they all stood in line to his right. Then they gave him the sharpest salute he had ever seen, and they turned, walking out the door. Many people in the restaurant stood up and clapped too. The moment united a whole group of strangers. It was special. It was an amazing moment. Lou couldn't even hide it. He shed a bunch of tears while looking at those guys leave. He explained that he was in complete awe of them. He said that he felt the deepest gratitude for the men who had expressed their gratitude for his service in such a profound way. He would never forget it. Those in the restaurant slowly went back to their meals, and the buzz in the restaurant started up again. But it wasn't as easy for Lou to resume his day. Annette told him to sit down for a moment. She could see that he needed some time to catch his breath. The experience had a massive impact on him, and he needed time to take it in. He was shaking. Annette, who was a military wife and whose son was retired Air Force, was also moved by the experience. She said that the experience gave her a new love and respect for the service. She said that it was rewarding to see that the military was still strong and that young service members were still so polite. She also gave up a lot during the times her husband was deployed, and getting the appreciation touched her heart. Lou would eventually pull himself together, and they left. But the moment would stay with them. Seeing how young men gave thanks to their elders was amazing. The moment was also going to stay with many others that were there, and some of them were curious about the young men. With a bit of research, local journalists figured out who those guys were. Some of the local news stations and papers reported that the 5 Marines were all private first class. Their names were Kevin Morris, Val Diaz, Eric A. Morales, Victor M. Andrade Gomez, and Elijah Reynolds. Journalists wanted to know why these men did what they did. Their answer was simple. It was the right thing to do. As Val Diaz expressed, Lou had fought for them. Now, it was their turn. They had for sure made a big impact on Lou and his wife, and the moment would live on in his mind for years. Thanks again for watching. Join us again for even more incredible stories.